Welcome to the Catholic Sobriety Podcast, the go-to resource for women seeking to have a deeper understanding of the role alcohol plays in their lives. Women who are looking to drink less or not at all for any reason. I am your host, Christy Walker. I'm a wife, mom, and a joy-filled Catholic, and I am the Catholic Sobriety Coach, and I am so glad you're here. You were created on purpose and for a purpose. My friend and Catholic life coach, Jessica Castillo, says this often, and I firmly believe this as well. I think it's one of the many things that Jessica and I have in common, and we both have a desire to help other women know and understand this truth as well. I'm so honored to have Jessica back on the podcast today. It's been about a year since she was on, and believe it or not, Lent is quickly approaching. I know we just finished Advent and the Christmas season, and Lent's going to be here on February 14th this year. So I knew that I wanted to have her back on to talk about her free Missio Parata Lenten challenge. And Missio Parata is Latin for mission ready. I participated in it last year, and it was amazing. I also recommend that you go back and listen to episode 9. You were one of my very first interviews, and it was a very early podcast. And go listen to Jessica's story, and she also talks more about Missio Parata there as well. Jessica is a former West Point graduate and Army officer. She helps high-achieving Catholic women excel at their own missions by helping them learn to optimize every aspect of their health so that they are not hindered in their work by depression, fatigue, overwhelm, or preventable illnesses. Jessica knows that God has something important for every woman, and that is her goal, is to help bring that out in them. Jessica is the founder of A Thriving Catholic and host of the podcast, A Thriving Catholic. So welcome back, Jessica. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Christy. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's go ahead and start off, because I'm sure the question that everyone has had, if they haven't listened to episode 9 and they haven't had the pleasure of, coming upon any of your social media or your podcast, is, what is Missio Parata and how did it come about?
Okay, so Missio Parata is my free Lenten challenge, like you mentioned, that basically combines some very disciplined physical practices with deep and intentional prayer. And the intention behind all of it is that you, through the process of participating in the Missio Parata challenge, that you really do become this fit instrument in the hands of God, that you are now mission ready and you can accomplish the will of the Lord in your life in, if not a new way, like a more profound or a deeper way. And so that is basically what Missio Parata is. And so some of those practices, the physical practices, there's disciplined diet and fasting, there's intentional movement every day, and a focus on getting enough sleep. We combine that with prayer of the rosary and Lectio Divina. And it really got started. Last Lent was the first time I ran it. So this will be the second annual Missio Parata Lenten Challenge. But the way it really started was around this time last year before Lent. I was really reflecting and praying a lot on this concept of mission. And part of it is probably because of my background as a former Army officer. And I think in terms of objectives and missions sometimes. But I was really motivated and inspired by this quote from St. John Henry Newman, which I've always loved so much. But the quote is, "God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me, which he has not committed to another. I have my mission." And so this idea of mission, this concept that every single human person was created, like you said in the intro, on purpose and for purpose. Well, what is that purpose and how do we help uncover it and discover it? And so as I was praying and reflecting on this before Lent last year, I really felt like the Lord was saying to me, well, your role is to get the mission ready. You get the mission ready. I don't know what your mission is. I don't know what the Lord is calling you to do. All I know is that He has created you for a purpose. And so my role in it is to help you become the most capable and fit instrument you can possibly be so that you can fulfill that role and so that you can step into that mission and do it even better.
Oh, yes, that's so important, I think, for people to realize because sometimes we just get stuck not feeling well. I've heard you say sometimes we forget how it feels to feel well because we've just spent so much time feeling not good or just being trapped by the comforts that we have. And then when we start to detach ourselves from those things, we're like, oh my goodness, it just opens yourself up and you're like, this is what it feels like to feel really well. And I can say I've done a lot of different things. I've done like Whole30 and different types of elimination diets. And those are so, so helpful. And what I loved about Missio Parata is not just the food aspect of it, but because it's Lent and we're dedicating this to God and trying to make it a holy work and take care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit during Lent. I loved your challenge because it not only incorporated the food aspect, which I'll let you talk about later, but also exercise and our spirituality, like praying the rosary or Lectio Divina. And I just found it to be so wonderful. And my husband, he actually does Exodus 90, and which is really hardcore and involves cold showers. So I'm so glad that your challenge does not involve cold showers. But it's similar in the way that it's like self-mastery and just detaching. And by the end of Lent last year, I just felt better than I think I've ever felt. And I really did feel mission ready. Now, that's not to say I didn't fall back into my old ways because I have. And that's why I'm so looking forward to Missio Parata to just kind of get myself mission ready again because I feel like I was more creative. I had so much more mental clarity. I had so much more energy. And that's something that I'm sure you hear time and time again from the women that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the whole point of all of it. This is why we do it. And cold showers, I think, are wonderful. They're so good.
Mhm.
And but of course, I wanted to create a challenge that was hard and intentionally hard, but all for a purpose. And of course, cold showers serve a purpose too. I'm not saying they
Yeah.
don't, but I think what when I first created the challenge too, the idea was in my mind that, oh, maybe people aren't going to want to do this
Mm,
because I know a lot of, so I am a certified health coach, and I know that a lot of times with health coaching, there it's very common to try to take this very gentle approach. You tell someone to just maybe drink more water or to get a little bit more movement, or you take these very tiny baby steps. And I kind of felt like that was not really my role or my personality either, that wasn't what I could effectively bring to the table. And so when I created the Missio Prada challenge, I almost thought about it as throwing a gauntlet down and saying, here you
mhm.
go, this is hard. And I'm unapologetic. Like, this will be
Yeah.
hard. This is a challenge. And the beauty of it, though, is that you can do hard things,
Mhm,
and you can do hard things for the greater glory of God. And so I think that what happens is that we start to feel that inspiration, that magnanimity in our soul. We feel this expansive feeling of, yes, I can do something hard for God. And it's going to result in all of these amazing things, but even in the process of it, it's changing and transforming us, and we're growing.
mhm. Yes, I believe that so wholeheartedly. I think of it like sometimes when I have to get up in the morning and go work out, and I know that the garage is going to be freezing cold and I don't want to do it. I just think of it as I'm just getting to the edge of the pool and jumping in instead of baby stepping into the pool where it lasts so much longer and it's just so much harder. And then I might not even go in all the way because it's just, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But if I just jump in, then that only lasts for a minute. And then afterwards, I'm like so glad the way that I did it. And so that's what I always like visualize in my mind. If I have to take my dog on a walk and it's freezing cold outside, I'm like, just jump in the pool, Christy. It's going to be
Yeah.
so much better.
Yeah. Or I like to say too, decide and then don't decide. You've
Hmm.
already decided. So when we start talking ourselves out of it or thinking,
Yes.
oh, maybe I'll just do some of it or I'll do a little bit. And then we start, you know, half stepping. And we don't need to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, on that topic, something that always gets me going is the quote by Pope
Yeah.
Benedict the 16th that the world offers you comfort, but you are not made for comfort, you are made for greatness. And in a world that offers us comfort and convenience, why do you think that they really can keep us stuck and stagnant and even dissatisfied? So, why do you think that is? Right now, alcohol feels like the only way that you can cope with the stress of motherhood, social pressures, and maybe even fit in with your group of friends. But you're starting to realize that it's leaving you feeling ashamed, disconnected, and maybe even out of control. Imagine if you could wake up each morning feeling at peace and proud of the choices that you're making and free from the pressure to drink, whether that's at home or in social settings. And that, my friend, is where my 5-day sacred sobriety kickstart comes in. By the end of the 5 days, you will feel more peaceful and in control because you will have more clarity and confidence around your decisions to take it or leave it. You're also going to learn how to manage your mind in a way that is aligned with your faith. You will learn how to speak truth over yourself, and that will help you root out what's keeping you stuck. So check out my 5-day Sacred Sobriety Kickstart and gain the clarity you need to make the decision to take alcohol or leave it from a place of peace. You can visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. I have a pop-up there, or just go to my show notes.
Yeah. First of all, I totally love that quote from Pope Benedict the 16th, one of my favorite quotes too. But I think that some of the ways this worldly comfort keeps us stuck and stagnant is that, first of all, just the science behind it of how dopamine works in our brain. So I know that you probably work with clients about this all the time, but things like scrolling our phones and eating sugar and junk food and drinking alcohol, all of these things cause these spikes, at least initially, a big spike in dopamine to an unnaturally high level. And so in our brains, we think this feels amazing. This is so good. I want this. But then what happens is we have that crash, the dopamine crash, where now everything feels bad and we can't even get back up to baseline again unless we try to start seeking out another dopamine hit. And so I think when we think about worldly comforts, what we're really searching for, what our brain is searching for, is dopamine. We're trying to have this molecule of motivation, the molecule of more, this neurotransmitter that makes us feel good and happy, and this is a good thing. So I think on a scientific level, this is what's kind of happening in our brains. And the reason why that sort of stuff keeps us stuck and stagnant is that we're now stuck in this loop of destructive or behavior, really, that's not leading us in a good direction. It's not leading us on the path to greater health or greater virtue. And it also isn't helping us to do things that we really desire to do with our time and with our lives, because now we're stuck where we just waste time scrolling our phones or on Netflix, or we're wasting time feeling sick or unwell because we ate poorly or we drank too much or we did all of these things in this pursuit of this dopamine high. And so what happens is that we don't end up taking the action or moving forward on the things that are really important to us. So we stay stuck. And then I think also there's a spiritual level. St. Thomas Aquinas pointed this out himself. He said that man cannot live without joy. Therefore, when he's deprived of true spiritual joys, it is necessary that he become addicted to carnal pleasures. Mm-hmm. And I always think about that quote, because the reason why we're seeking comfort in the world, why we're searching out this dopamine, is because we were made to live with joy. We were made to have joy. And so we can have a more authentic, healthy, real joy, which is a deep spiritual joy, or a joy from accomplishing our goals, or because we also get dopamine from doing these sort of things, making progress toward an important goal, or just the joy that we feel when we are eating well and moving well and living in balance, and we are having this deep prayer. This is also joy, but it's joy of a different and more lasting sort. And it actually helps us become better and move towards our goals. So I think that that's kind of the difference between, here's worldly comfort, and it's only going to feel good for a very short amount of time, and then it's going to feel worse, and you're going to have to keep chasing that, and it's not going to be consistent. But here's a steeper kind of joy. Here's this joy that, of course, man, you were made for joy, so you must experience joy. But we get to choose and use our intellect and our will and decide then, well, which do I want to pursue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I love that St. Thomas Aquinas quote too. I think that's so illuminating and can really help us keep focused on the why of it. Like, instead of beating ourselves up, like, why do I do this? Why am I doing this? Look for maybe the deeper root of why you're doing it. It's probably not what you think a lot of times. So I really like that. Though, speaking of virtues, so virtues like temperance can be really powerful in helping us detach from vices. So can you share about how cultivating virtues has helped you personally in your endeavors to be mission ready?
Yeah, absolutely. So temperance, we know, is that moral virtue. When we talk about temperance, it's the virtue that moderates the attraction of pleasures and provides balance in the use of created goods. So when we're thinking temperance, this is what we're thinking. The cool thing about growth in virtue is that when you start growing in one virtue, it actually becomes easier to grow in other virtues as well. And when we talk about growing in virtue in order to detach from vices, one thing that I think is really important to point out is the way that we grow in virtue is by the exercising of virtue. So it's kind of like that analogy of working out in the gym. How do you grow your muscles? Well, you put them under stress. You stress your muscles by lifting weights, and then you grow back bigger, stronger, better muscles. And the same thing with, how do we grow in virtue? How do we practice virtue? Well, we have to give ourselves opportunities to practice virtue. I mean, they exist already. Our daily lives are going to provide plenty of opportunities to practice virtue, but we can also intentionally train ourselves in growing in virtue. And I think what people start to notice, especially if someone were to take on something like the Missio Parata Challenge, or any intentional endeavor where we are deliberately saying no to one kind of perceived good or to a comfort that the world offers us, and instead we're embracing a different path, this maybe more challenging and more arduous path, what we're giving ourselves the opportunity to do is to now exercise that virtue of temperance, those virtues of fortitude, those virtues of prudence. And as we start to grow stronger through the use of exercising these virtues, they become easier. They become more habitual for us to exercise. And this has 100% been true in my life, because I can testify, much like you, that whenever I am really holding to these habits that I know are helping me to be at my best physically and mentally and spiritually, that everything in my life is going usually much
Mhm.
better. So I'm more successful in my business. I'm having an easier time in my relationships with my family or homeschooling my kids. There's so many benefits that just come from exercising these virtues and then how it spills over into every part of our life.
Mhm. That's so true because I notice I can get so much done when I am balancing all those plates and just giving attention to each one. Not a ton of attention, but a little bit. And it's so interesting how I can all of a sudden, when I was thinking, I don't have time for anything, like I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to cook, we need to eat out, or I don't have time to clean my house, it's a complete disaster. Yet when I get in that habit, and that's what you focus on so much, and I love, is once you get in that habit, it doesn't mean that you're always doing it perfectly, but when you're in that habit, it's like everything else goes so much more smoothly because you're not having to spend inordinate amount of time on one thing because you've been able just to do little daily habits to keep everything going smoothly. And then, yeah, it's so freeing because sometimes I think, well, I don't really want to do that. I would rather do that. I would rather scroll on my phone or whatever. Well, that's not going to get me the results that I want. It might in that moment be something that I think that I want to do, but it's not going to get me the results I want. So if you keep your results in mind, that's also super helpful as well. But I
Yeah, I think
think,
about I was just going to mention, I know probably a lot of your listeners might be working their way through to Father Mike Schmitz's Bible in a Year
Mhm,
podcast. Since we're January starting the year, a lot of people are probably working through that. And I know a few days ago we read about how Jacob and Esau and how Esau
mhm,
was willing to trade his birthright to Jacob for in exchange for a bowl of
yeah,
lentil stew or pottage. And I know Father Mike highlighted, well, how can we be willing to trade away something so precious for a bowl of stew? But that's how it is when we're actually in that moment of temptation where we're like, okay, I have these dreams and these aspirations and maybe even this mission from God that I am supposed to be fulfilling. But in the actual moment, in the right now moment, it feels so much better to try to seek out comfort than it does to do the hard work of what I might be
yeah,
called to do. And that's not to say there's not a time and a place for rest, and there's not a time and place where it's probably fine to be on your phone or to watch Netflix or to
mhm,
rest. There's a time for all of that. It's just that's where it comes in to using the virtues and relying on the virtues and using your prudential judgment of when is this an appropriate time and when is this not an appropriate time. And again,
mhm,
that's what temperance is. It's just moderating the attraction
yeah,
of pleasure. It's just providing balance in the use of these created goods. It's not saying you should never have
mhm.
pleasure, you should never use these creative goods.
Right. I'm so glad you highlighted it. And that scripture is, I do listen to Father Mike Schmitz and Bible in a Year. And I know that when I've heard that scripture, I'm just like, that's crazy. Like, but we do that. How often do we do that? And so it is very good to look at those old stories like that and be like, it's so applicable to my life today because how many times have I given something so good just for the carnal pleasure in that moment that I think that I need, and then I just don't feel great later. And I'm like, wait, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't want to do that. So I'm sure that my listeners are wondering because we've alluded to a little bit about what you need to do in Missio Parata. But I would just like you to go through what are some of those things that we are detaching from so that we can free ourselves up to greater health and clarity and optimization. And also, I just want to say that one of the things that Jessica has is like this Excel. She's like an Excel sheet wizard, you people. I just want to let you know this. But she had an Excel sheet. I don't know if she's doing it this year. Are you doing it again? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's live. And for some people, that can be daunting. Like, oh my gosh, look at Susie. She's like knocking it out of the park every day. And I am sitting here like, well, okay, I can, not to brag, but I can rock the no alcohol thing. I'm just saying, but I've been practicing it for a long time. But some of the other things, like the fasting, and I'll let you get into all of that. Some of those things I can't hit every day. But when I was filling it out, sometimes those types of things, my brain is like, I didn't do all of them. So now I've totally messed it up. And I just did not allow myself to do that. And your coaching and everything was so helpful in that, because you are so like, it's okay if you don't do it, just do as much as you can. And I did that instead of quitting and saw so many fruits from that. So if you could just talk about what's in it, maybe some of the hurdles that people will face and how to get through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So these are the components of basically what the challenge is. The first you've mentioned already is disciplined diet and fasting. So during the course of the Missio Parata challenge, you will be abstaining from sugar, alcohol, gluten, and dairy for the entire challenge. And so that eliminates the Sunday cheat. There will not be a Sunday cheat in the challenge. You will be abstaining from these things the entire challenge. And the reason why we do that is because these are actually the most inflammatory foods for most people. And so eliminating them entirely is going to help your body heal and strengthen. And in addition to that, during the challenge, you'll be fasting on Fridays. And of course, I give a lot more detail and training into what that consists of. Basically, if you're not pregnant or nursing, in which case you will not be fasting, or if you don't have a medical condition that prohibits you from fasting, fasting is a powerful spiritual practice, and it also has a lot of physical benefits as well. So Fridays during the challenge, there is a fasting component. There's also a restorative sleep is part of the challenge. So I'm literally challenging you to spend 7 to 8 hours in bed each night. And for some people, that sounds too easy, and they're thinking, well, how hard could it be? But for other people who are sleeping a lot less than that, it's a real challenge to be consistent in your bed and wake time. But that's such an important, critically important component to helping people to have the clarity, that focus, that vitality that they need. Sleep is foundational, and a lot of people aren't doing it. So that's part of the challenge. The other physical aspect of the challenge is daily movement. I challenge everyone to move every day for at least 30 minutes. And this can be broken up throughout the day. I let people choose whether they want to do it all at one time. If you want to break up and maybe you go for a 10-minute walk here and another 10-minute walk there, and then 10 minutes of stretching or something later in the day. Or if you want it to be more intense. And so this is kind of variable, and I'll let you choose how you want to do that. But there's just no doubt that exercise is the most effective way to increase our ability to focus, to concentrate, to grow new brain cells, and also our ability to manage stress. And all of this helps us to serve God better because we have that focus and that clarity and that ability to think more clearly. And then we combine all of those physical practices with deep prayer. So I ask everyone to commit to praying a daily rosary and also 30 minutes of Lectio Divina every day of the challenge, and then going to confession at least once during the challenge, which is just actually required of all Catholics during Lent anyway. So you're just doing that. So that's the components of what I'm asking people to do. But I also include in the challenge things to help make that more possible. So I have a pre-challenge training call where I actually outline the exact protocol of the challenge, how all of it's going to work, what resources you have access to make it easier. And then I'll do a weekly live coaching and training during the challenge. So every single week of the challenge, I'm providing a deeper training on some aspect of the challenge. So sleep and diet and exercise and Lectio Divina and how to pray the rosary, like all of the components of the challenge, I provide deeper training in. And so that's a chance every week for people to come together and get their questions answered and be coached live as well. There is a private Facebook group where everyone can connect and build that community so that we're able to know that we're in this together. And then what you were talking about is the shared Google sheet that I've created that is the habit tracker for the challenge. And so for every single day of the challenge, you basically go on there and put your name on a row of the habit tracker, and you have the chance to track how you're doing on all of these components of the challenge every single day of the challenge. And that's really meant to help keep you motivated and accountable to yourself more than anything. But also at the end of the challenge, when I have the post-challenge closing call, I do have the opportunity for you to win a prize for participation in the challenge, which I just think is a fun way to wrap everything up. And also that post-challenge closing call, I mean, you've spent all of Lent working on getting mission ready. And so where do you go from here? What do you do next? How do you go out into the world and actually serve the Lord in your mission? And that's what we do in the wrap-up call. So those are all the components of the challenge, and then what I'm trying to include in the free challenge. So all of that is free in the challenge because I think it's powerful and I think it's really helpful.
Oh, it is. And it's so generous. And there's so much included in it. And it's so powerful, right? Because I say this all the time when I'm talking to women about sobriety. When you have support and you have other people walking alongside of you, it just makes it so much easier. So I know being in that private Facebook group, sometimes women would be like, I'm having headaches, because when you have been eating all this sugar from the holidays and then you detox from it, your body is going to feel some things that are very uncomfortable. But when you have somebody else that's like, yeah, I was feeling like that too, but I got through it, or you come on, I mean, you're very active in there too. And you're like, this is what's happening. This is what you can do to minimize that, and so it's so very helpful to have that added support on the journey as well. Because if we're just doing it for ourselves, that's great. If we're doing it for ourselves and for God, that's amazing too. But when we just have that extra added encouragement and support of, you and I are both feel very strongly about spiritual gifts and like our ability as Christians to work together. And I feel like this is just another powerful way of all of us coming together and supporting each other, encouraging each other, and being the light of Christ to each other, just for the greater good. And you alluded a little bit to what happens at the end, because that's what comes up for me is at the end of Lent, I start feeling really anxious. I feel so good. I don't want this to go downhill. And maybe we don't keep such a strict regimen all the time, but what is like one thing that you would tell women as they're reintroducing some of these things or deciding what to keep and what they can maybe be a little more lax on?
Yeah, so that's such a good question. I think that the main thing is to reflect on what felt the best for you during the challenge, what had the biggest impact. And so those are going to be the things that you want to keep moving forward. And I will be honest, for most of the people who participated in the challenge last year, the most consistent thing that people said that they were going to continue in their life and keep doing moving forward was actually consistent Lectio Divina. For a lot of people, that was something that they had not done before. And so recognizing as you parse through the pieces of the challenge and you try to analyze, okay, what is it that is making me feel so good right now? What is having the biggest impact in my health, in my happiness, in my relationship with God? And then as you find those elements of the challenge, yeah, just continuing moving them forward. I think that's really helpful. And I think it's also helpful too to work with a coach or to find someone, accountability buddy, or someone to work through this with you where you recognize that you want to maybe loosen some of these practices up, but you don't want to completely go back to square one or start over again. And so I think it can be really helpful to talk with another person about well, how can I create parameters in my life where this fits seamlessly, where maybe I'm not never having sugar ever, but where can I put it in my life where it's not taking over my life again? Or, maybe I'm not going to be fasting every single Friday, but how could I still have some fasting in my life? And this is something that's helpful. So I think those things are important. And I think also the main thing with ending out the challenge is just, again, focusing back very intently on the reason why you took it on in the first place. So now that you've got to this point and you're feeling good and you're feeling capable and you're feeling mission ready, well, it's time now to really offer that as a gift to the Lord and say, okay, Lord, what do you want to do with this extra energy and focus and vitality? And I think that the number one way to not completely fall off the wagon and just slip back into all your old habits is to continue that walk with the Lord and continue offering this to Him and letting Him show you what He has in store for you next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I also recommend keeping a journal so that you can go back and remember how you felt all along that journey and then how good you felt at the end. Because I know that sometimes it's easy to start getting into that place where you're not feeling great, but you're not really sure why. And then you can look back and be like, remember when I was doing all the things and I felt really good, but it's still very rested. What was I doing? And then you can go back and chart your journey and say, okay, this is where the breakdown is. But again, like you were saying, that's what having working with a coach, if you're struggling with that, women can come to you and you can say, okay, what is your main goal? What's your main objective? And here's how we're going to get there, and then guide them in that, which is so, so very helpful. So before we close, you've just shared so much good information, and I know that this challenge is going to be really, really helpful for so many. Can you just let people know where they can sign up for the challenge, where they can find you, and just anything else that you want to talk about or promote while you're here?
Yeah, so you can sign up for the challenge at athrivingcatholic.com/Lent. And you can find me and connect with me in my work at A Thriving Catholic. That's my handle on Instagram and Facebook and my website and my podcast. So it's pretty easy to remember. It's A Thriving Catholic.
Perfect. So one other question, since I did it last year, and maybe some of my listeners did too, since you talked about it on the last time you were here, is if you signed up for the challenge last year, are you automatically on the email list to be on it this year, or do we re-sign up?
You might still be in the Facebook group from last year, but you should go ahead and re-sign up so that I can get you on this year's email list. And that way you'll get notifications of when we're meeting and all of that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm going to do that as soon as we're done here so that I can get on your list. Jessica, thank you so much once again for being here, but most of all for the work that you are doing with Catholic women to get us mission ready so that we can not be constantly seeking happiness, but have that fulfilled and sustained joy that God desires for all of us.
Well, you're so welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Catholic Sobriety Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I would invite you to share it with a friend who might also get value from it as well. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I am the Catholic Sobriety Coach, and if you would like to learn how to work with me or learn more about the coaching that I offer, visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. Follow me on Instagram at the Catholic Sobriety Coach. I look forward to speaking to you next time. And remember, I am here for you. I am praying for you. You are not alone.